So let's talk a little bit about polymorphism. Polymorphism is a pretty difficult topic. A lot of people are very confused by it. They don't really understand what it means. So let's try to break this down and really understand what is polymorphism. Well, polymorphism, the word comes from the word many. Poly meaning many, and morph meaning form. So what it really means is many forms. And it's still kind of a confusing concept to a lot of people. I think if you ask a developer, I know I have been knowing an expert developer asking the question and being asked a question in an interview, a lot of the response will come out something like, well, if you had a shape and then you had a square and then you had a draw method and so on down the lines describing an example, instead of really understand what is polymorphism and what is the base concept of it. So I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. There is two components to polymorphism. You have some code that is dependent on some kind of interface, and when I use the word interface here, I just mean some method of operating with it, some way that that code is being used or that class is being used. An interface for a class is simply just the methods that exist on that class. So you have some code that is dependent on some methods that exist in the class or some methods that are defined. And then the second component is that you have behavior of that code is determined by the actual class that is implementing that interface. So what that means is that when you actually use that code that is dependent on the interface, what the methods that is going to call, they are not preset. We don't know what they are. That code doesn't know what they are or what they are going to do. Instead, what happens is when that code runs, depending on what type is actually implementing that method or that interface, that's what's going to happen. So a good way to think about this is if you ask someone to give you something to write with, an interface would be something that writes. And they hand you something, you don't know what it is when you ask. If you ask the question, give me something to write with, you might get a pen, you might get a pencil, you might get a marker. All of those things are able to write. Think about it as the write method. But depending on what you get is what gets put on the paper is what it's going to look like. So if you got a marker, it might be a thick marker line. It might be a red line if it's a red marker. If you got a blue ballpoint pen, it's going to be a small blue line. If you got a pencil, it's going to be a pencil line on that paper. So that's really what polymorphism is. It says, hey, as the user of the code that is using some interface, I don't know what you are going to give me. What actually implements that interface or what I actually get is what's going to determine the behavior. So let's look at an example of this. In this case, I have our animal class here. And our animal class has a method called makeNoise. A lot of animals make noise, so we have a base method in our animal class called makeNoise. Now we are going to use inheritance here, and we have a dog and a cat, and they both inherit from animal. They are both types of animals. So what we are going to do here is for dog, we are going to override, we are going to redefine that makeNoise method, and we are going to put out bark. And we are going to make a dog bark. And for cat, we are going to redefine the makeNoise method. We are going to override that and we are going to have meow. And so if we had some code that was using animal, we don't have to specify it in that code. That code doesn't need to know whether it's working with a dog or a cat. Instead, it will program against the animal's interface, which is against an animal type with a makeNoise method. And at runtime, when we run our code, if we have actually assigned our animal to a dog instance, then it will do a bark. If we have assigned it to a cat instance, it will do a meow. So really polymorphism is just that ability for at runtime or dynamically for that code to be able to call whatever method is implemented by the class that inherits from the base class. So whatever the real class is, the underlying type, So that's really a simple way, and I'm going to show you how we can actually do this in code.